In the past 40 plus years, there's been a strong emphasis on organized and standardized education in the United States, as the institutions that we come to know and appreciate have become readily available for most Americans. This is thanks to legislation such as the National School Lunch Act, making it easier for low-income families to send their children to school, Brown v. Board of Education for banning segregated schools on the grounds of race, and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was passed by Lyndon B. Johnson to provide funds to schools in less fortunate communities. Without this accessibility to education, it would be impossible to improve on the quality of it. One of the earliest efforts to have higher quality education in some of the brightest minds in the world was in 1989 when George H.W. Bush and 49 state governors met in Charlottesville, Virginia to discuss a solution to the United States being behind most of Europe in education. This began the search for greater unified education in America. Shortly thereafter, the National Council of Mathematics published a set of standards for teaching mathematics that would lay some of the initial groundwork for standards. The Clinton administration in 1994 enacted a standards-based vision with reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that also included measuring things like 4th grade reading and 8th grade math to measure progress for students. In making sure that all states had rigorous standards for all subject areas and grade levels, No Child Left Behind was established with overwhelming bipartisan support in 2001. It sought to increase the federal role in making sure that schools are responsible for their students' progress. Some other key points it focused on was helping English language learners, students in special ed, and poor and minority students get an education. As the deadline approached for these terms, no state had completely met the standards. These states were essentially given a way out as the Every Student Succeeds Act was rolled out in 2015. This, along with Common Core education standards, are the current standards in America that give more control to the states and districts and determine the standards students are held to, while also providing funding and making sure that all students have equal opportunity. I support the current regulations and budget under the Every Student Succeeds Act and the Common Core, as it gives all students a chance at their education while also giving the state government the power in their dealings. Recently, under the Trump administration, with the help of Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, there is a desire to cut education department funding by $9 billion. Along with this, Trump has proposed that several more $100 million would be allocated to charter schools instead of public schools. Charter schools do not support a system for those in impoverished areas, as it may benefit some. However, the funds stolen away from public schools make it harder for those students who stay in public schools to get a high-quality education. This includes cutting funding for certain academic, emotional health, and English language learning programs that have started to become commonplace in schools across America. All of these which were supported in many bipartisan agreements in Congress. Another bash to the extra funding being put towards charter schools is in regard to accountability. Charter schools are not held to the same standards as public schools, and it has been historically confusing to monitor them because they work on an individualized level. Even though the market is said to monitor them, it is still hard to tell whether it is necessarily true because there are no numbers or research backing these claims. Also, charter schools can be seen as an experiment because it is not a proven institution, and there are hundreds of thousands of students' education and futures on the line for a concept that isn't fully supported across America. Supporters of these budget cuts say that it empowers parents of disadvantaged youth and gives them a choice for their children. Along with this, the newfound competition is said to be a better way of supporting schools without having as much taxpayer dollars. Overall, these suggested spending cuts to education in America don't make much sense, as the skepticisms outweigh any positives. The numbers are not set on those being effective tactics. The amount of money being cut in the budget, along with the spending gradually being split between charter and public schools, puts many unfortunate youths in trouble of not making it out of poverty and doesn't support standards of education on a state level. The current budget provides funding for tons of after-school programs and necessary educational benefits for those who are less fortunate financially, and who have disabilities in some capacity. In an effort to protect students and Americans' futures, it is important to talk about state representatives, as these proposals are currently just that, proposals. Mailing and calling your state representatives in the House and Senate and voicing for there not to be cuts in education budget goes a long way, as it will require hundreds of votes to even begin to start cutting things from the budget. Talk to school board representatives to stay informed on any changes, and encourage your students to take advantage of these excellent programs in place and to have a voice for students who need these services to get a great education. If there is a continuous support for the public school system and there are families that care about their students' educations, it will be hard for Congress to make any decisions to hurt their constituents. Use the voice you have to speak for those who are less fortunate. Speak for funding of education.